members of the public or people wanting to make public comment?
Yes, but they won't be, well, I don't know about the public comment, but they aren't on the screen.
So we have 2 members of the public in. When public comment comes, you can ask if there's any that would like to make comment, and they can raise their hands and we can call on them.
Okay, so it's not like anybody else has to be let in right now. We're all here.
Right.
Perfect.
Right. All the panelists are here.
Awesome. Well, good morning, all. Welcome to our City School Liaison Committee meeting. Good morning, and I guess we can, I'll call the meeting to order at 8:31 a.m. And I'd like to see now if we have any members of the public who are interested in making a public comment.
Brian or Doug, if either of you would like to, you can just raise your hand. Not seeing any.
Okay, perfect. So we will conclude with that, and I'd like to go ahead and move, see if there's any motions to go ahead and approve the minutes from our last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. Can we go ahead with a roll call vote?
Mayor Constantine?
Aye.
Councilmember Carr?
Yes.
Board Member Sullivan?
Aye.
Board Member Horner?
Can you clarify who motioned?
Yes, I believe it was Mayor Constantine who motioned and Trustee Horner who seconded.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, moving along on our agenda, we are at joint City of Morgan Hill and Morgan Hill Unified School District items. First up is our Courtyard space study.
So the city can start if you want, or we can have the school district start. Chris will share from our side.
Yeah, we at the staff level, we reviewed a draft, and we were spending some time looking at that. And I believe we just received an updated draft final report at the staff level. I believe yesterday. It could have been the day before. We're working around the clock, so the days are kind of blending together at this point. but we should have that available for this group at the next meeting. And I believe Anissa at the school district has it, so I'm not sure if she's forwarded it to Kirsten or Steve yet, but that's our review right now at the staff level. Then I think we should be able to bring that forward with the outcomes that have been listed there. And I mean, I could go through, we talked a little bit about, I believe 2 months ago, we talked a little bit about what the big picture said, which basically we did understand was there's not enough room for the city to remain there and all the school districts maintenance related functions to move over there. But there is potentially an option where the city long-term could keep all its plan for its future, as well as keep transportation there with some changes we would do. We talked about the shared parking sort of with the park sort of thing. So that looks like that could be a long-term opportunity. And we would go through that when we have the full report.
Great, and then is there anything from the district side to add to this particular discussion?
I just might add that I appreciate Chris's leadership and his team in working through the project. I think that we're, ideally for the school district, aligning all of our operations departments in one area would be ideal and more efficient. But in looking at the space analysis, that's not possible given the constraints of the site, unless we were able to go up 4 or 5 stories, which is, again, not reasonable financially at all. So I think if we are to consider staying, that it would be in the district's interest to look at continuing to pursue purchasing the portion that we currently lease. That would help to alleviate some of the district's operating costs as well. I know both entities right now are in the situation of looking at budget reductions in the near future, and so that would help with the district's operating expenses if we could leverage some of our capital facilities to purchase and reduce our operating expenses out of the general fund. And I think that in talking with Chris, this report will move us towards making a decision, because we've been waiting years to make a decision whether or not that was feasible. So we look forward to being able to make that determination after getting the results of the space study completed.
And I'm sorry, I might have missed this the first time around, Chris. When is the projected date that we might have the completed study with the final results?
So we just got a draft completed study 2 days ago for staff review. So my expectation, if it, and this would be a question for Christina and Steve, but if they would like it to come to this group before the full council and school board, or if we'd like to present it to both and then discuss it in this group, I think that piece is to be determined. But we should have that in the next month or so, ready for review for the board and council.
Yeah, and Christina and I haven't talked about this, but my belief is that it doesn't have to come back to this group for a final review or approval. That we can, once we with staff have reviewed it, to be able to present it to our respective groups, that we can do that in whatever way is most appropriate. We happen to have are putting together a facilities plan meeting with our trustees to talk about many things, including where we're moving forward with the next phases of our construction and modification and our facilities needs, in light of a lot of things, including the state budget situation. And we would like to include, as part of this, kind of sunshining it to the board of potential options and the status of it anyway. So that's where I am. Christina, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I think part of it might just depend on timing, on when it actually gets done and how it coincides with our next meeting. I mean, it could just be sort of an informational item for the next meeting, if it's before, and then just sort of get any input from this group. But I think it's fine to just go straight on to the council and to the board if needed.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have questions before we move on from this particular item?
Wendy, if I might.
Absolutely.
I don't have a problem with that. Somehow there's years of history on this discussion that I'm pretty confident the rest of my council is not sort of, doesn't have that kind of background. So just however we bring it to our respective bodies, that somehow we capture some of the past discussion, the history, talking about this, and how we got to doing a space study. Doesn't just certainly pop on a city council agenda. I feel like there's just been more to this discussion than a space study. And I would hate for it to just be lost in sort of a space study and an ongoing facilities discussion that both entities have to have.
Great point. And as our resident historian, Carr, you would probably be the optimum person for both presentations with that history.
Fair point, Larry. That's a great point, because I know I can say confidently that I know most of our board is not aware of the history and the context. So that is a really great point. So thank you for that. Any other questions, John?
Yeah. Oh, forgetting we're not doing full mute discipline here. Yeah. So I'm fine with either way, though. I do, if the timing allows. I think there would be value in having another round of discussion in this format since this is a city school liaison committee, and this is the single biggest thing the two entities do together. If the timing works out and it's a little less formal, a little more discussion oriented, and I would appreciate the opportunity to get better educated. So this isn't a strong view on my point, but just all other things being equal, bringing it back here for one more discussion, if that works with the timing, I think would have some value.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think both staffs kind of have heard the impact, the input and the feedback shared. So if you guys can take that away and keep that in mind, that would be awesome. Anything else before we move on? Fantastic. Internet access. Who would like to tee this one up first?
I can maybe, you want me to start, Steve, or would you like to start?
No, please do.
Okay. So this was really spurred by the unprecedented times that we're in as we moved quickly to fulfill a challenge none of us knew with the pandemic that we would go immediately into distance learning. What we also realize is a significant gap that exists in our, what is kind of referred to as the digital divide. Those that have reasonable access to technology and those that don't. And while maybe my internet's saying it's unstable, so I might be a victim of bad internet right now. But one of the gaps that we see that continues to persist are those that don't have access or reliable access to broadband. Statewide, we know that our problem is not unique. Approximately 1.2 million students lacked access. In Morgan Hill, we have a little over 300 households, about 400 students total that don't have internet access. Our technology department and our educational services department have done an amazing job of responding quickly and in the best way possible. They've been able to work with our local internet providers to provide access via hotspots. And so we've distributed hotspots to our affected families. That comes at significant cost to implement, but it's something that we have to do in order to ensure students are able to learn from home. But aside from dealing with the short-term immediate need of providing internet access points, the superintendent tasks our technology team with also reaching out to our city to find out what may be done to increase internet access and broadband access. And so I know our Director of Technology and Enrollment, Veronica Hoyle-Kent, met, I think, either in late May or early June with John Lang to talk about some different options. And so I can recap what she's told me, and then maybe Christina, if you want to augment or add. And now I see that John has joined, so maybe he wants to share. But it seemed like we were aligned in the district's need to expand technology and access to students with some of the plans that are already underway with the city. And so it seemed like when Veronica and John met, the city had already been working with Wave Broadband to increase the access to the city itself. They were considering a leasing solution potentially from Wave Broadband that would build upon the city's network. And the expected impact would really be to the eastern portion of the city, where we've mapped our students who don't have access to internet, and that's an area of need, as well as the Paradise Valley area. And there was discussion about plans to that might consider putting internet access areas that would place the access points in areas that might point them in a way to help the San Martin area, which is an area where we're also seeing some significant infrastructure challenges. So hopefully John and Christina have done a good job of sharing the conversation you had, and I would ask you if you want to add anything to that as well.
Great, yes, thank you, Kristen. So John Lang has joined us, and so John, if you could just sort of recap just briefly what we've done, what we've been up to with the RFP, and sort of what our path forward is at this point in time.
Absolutely, thank you for the opportunity. So John Lang, City of Morgan Hill. Where we're at with the RFP right now is we have received their agreement. We are actually reviewing the agreement. The agreement calls for a two-prong approach. One is providing kind of the immediate connectivity to the city, and they will be using their existing network. As part of that process, in agreement, they will actually be building on a parallel path building a network for the city. So at the end of the agreement, we'll own our own network. So it's a parallel process. So one, they're providing daily connectivity, and then two, they'll actually build a network for us over time. I think Kristen summarized it very well in talking with Ms. Hoyle-Kent about what are the needs, and she did provide a pin map of kind of the general area within Morgan Hill proper, where there are student challenges with connectivity. Many of those pins actually align very well with the infrastructure that we would be needing to put in place to solve the city's need. So I think there's actually two additional conversations we need to have with WAVE. One is based upon our immediate connectivity needs. Are there ways we could use our existing facilities, for instance, like the CRC as one place? Could we actually do a little rooftop setup that would actually beam or push connectivity to some of those households? That may be a much cheaper option, if you will. So that's a conversation that needs to have with WAVE. We are going to start those conversations very quickly. We wanted to review their legal contract first, and then start to do the fine negotiations of that. And we're about to turn the corner on that. In addition, I've been talking with Joint Venture Silicon Valley Network as part of their broadband initiative. There may also be an opportunity to do a pilot with some other service providers using WAVE as kind of the backbone or the primary transmitter of information, but using some technology by other companies as a pilot to do either a demonstration project to light up those households. So there's two sets of conversations that are going on. But I will tell you the pin map that the school district provided aligns very closely and well with the infrastructure we plan to put in place as part of the city's project. So I do think there is a good marriage to be had there, and continuing conversations. That's kind of where we have left the conversations. The onus is more on me to refine the conversation with WAVE and then come back and share what I've learned. But I do think there's a lot of synergy based upon where we will be putting infrastructure. There could be an opportunity to serve some of these underserved households.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kirsten and John, for that update. Anybody have questions? No, seeing as none. Oh, John?
Quick one, maybe either staff can guide us as an elected. Not an hour goes by, I don't get an email from one group or another asking for help with their advocacy around the digital divide. There's and I don't know if you have any direction or advice, any of you, for us, where to put our efforts, because don't really have the expertise to know, who we should be aligning, whose letters we should be signing, what meetings we should be going to be most helpful and effective. So if any of the staff or other electeds have any helpful guidance on that, I'd like to hear it.
John, I don't have a real good answer to that. We've been hearing a lot from our residents during this time. We do remain challenged with connectivity in the community, and as much as we try to encourage opportunities at the FCC to maybe rethink about the way they do grants around programming, it really hasn't resonated. So don't have a very clear answer for you, and what is kind of the best where to put our eggs in what basket. I don't have a real clear answer for you on that. I apologize.
Trustee Horner, I think I've mentioned this before individually to some representatives that have asked. That's a great question, and it is a strong position you have as a trustee in working with our legislators at the state and federal level to make sure that companies that do provide services are expected to serve all those areas, and certainly where the most disadvantaged and rural communities are. And there was always a set aside fund federally that is expected. I know it's passed on to consumers, the cost, and you might see that on some sort of bill that you have, but I think it needs to be, it's never more important than it is right now for the operation of our society in any way, not just our schools and our government, but in everything we do. All commerce is related to that, and that divide is growing because there isn't the emphasis, and the percentage isn't growing on the money that will go to the high needs communities to provide those services. So my belief is the strongest way is to work with our legislators to impose requirements on service providers to actually provide services to the high needs areas without an expectation for more income to that company.
That's helpful. I appreciate that very much. Are there any particular groups that you know that are pushing that with the legislators, or is this more of a, just as an elected trustee, reach out to our state and federal electeds in our own capacity? I'm happy to do that, know how to do that. I didn't know, Mr. Lang mentioned joint ventures effort. There are many different efforts, and it may be that there's not an answer. I saw Mr. Carr waving his hand too, so maybe he has some other ideas. I'm certainly willing to do the work, just looking if there's any guidance on how to make that most productive, because like so many issues that have been illuminated in the last 3 months, none of the problems are new. But how do we get the will to solve them? And this one in particular, our uneven access to internet nationwide is a result of, as a business guy, it's funny to say, but our over addiction to free market capitalism. It has led to so many divides, including this one. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Great question. Yes, and my first instinct is that CSBA might have a.
Yeah, they are doing some work there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Larry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to sort of second joint venture Silicon Valley, John, is one. David Wachowski, who runs their broadband initiative and other initiatives, is just extremely knowledgeable. He also is familiar with Morgan Hill, having formerly worked for Wiltron and then Anritsu, and got some of his background there. But they have a lot of great private sector expertise on the issue and understand the public side of it as well. So they would be a great organization to get some information from, and I'm sure David and others would be happy to come give a briefing to the board if you wanted that. A couple of questions, if I might. First of all, for John Lang, are there any actions that you need the city to take in order to continue pursuing this dialogue with WAVE about these areas where we believe we need the most help, particularly with the pins, as you pointed out, where the school district needs some help for some of the families?
I don't believe so at this point. As we touched on at our last council meeting in terms of update and providing council a little bit of a status update on what's happening. WAVE did, as part of their proposal, suggest there are some opportunities to connect with either residents or businesses in terms of their service model that they propose to us. And this does align with that vision very well. So it's really a matter of crafting, I think, where specifically could we make the best targeted investment with the limited amount of funds. Based upon their initial drawings to start the conversation, I do think there's a lot of synergy and overlay as it relates to the affected areas that Morgan Hill Unified School District is trying to solve. So I think that's a great starting point for a conversation. Ultimately, we will be going back to council with an agreement. And part of that process will be able to say, this is where we think the public side beyond the city side, where there are kind of the best opportunities. So we would be looking to go back to council for approval or further direction on that. So I think we're in a good place to have those conversations with WAVE right now. But that's our goal, is to kind of bring back somewhat of a package for council to consider.
Okay. And John, I mean, that's all great news, but that's going to be a couple years off before that kind of coverage is provided because of the infrastructure that they need to lay.
Not necessarily so. Because of the parallel process that they're doing, there's enough infrastructure there to light the city facilities today. What we're really building on or looking to solve for is that long-term build out of a network for us. So I think because of this parallel path, there is an opportunity more immediately that we could be solving for the immediate need as part of the existing infrastructure that is there today, actually.
Okay.
So I don't
so
think
that's great
the horizon's
news.
as long.
That's great news, because I would going to see, do we need to have a short-term goal and a long-term goal sort of conversation on this, that if schools in the fall are opening up with some hybrid amount of online learning and in-class learning, how do we accommodate the needs of the kids who don't have online access in 6 months? But there might be a path to that with the discussion we're already having, if I understand you correctly, John.
That is correct. Based upon the existing infrastructure WAVE has in our community today, especially because it's more aligned to the southern part of our community, that conversation could happen a lot quicker, and potentially a solution for that happen a lot quicker.
Okay, that's excellent news. I thought we were going to be waiting some time and that we were going to need to find another avenue towards that. So that's excellent news. If we could just ask that continue to come back to us, and we make sure that we have an update and an ongoing conversation about that as the school district is sort of laying out its plans for the fall and where things are going to go, so we can be as helpful as possible for those families that need it. And then finally, Kirsten, a question: how different is it for the San Jose portion of our district compared to the Southern Morgan Hill portion of the district?
It's somewhat night and day as far as quality of internet. So in San Jose area, we see a significantly less number of families that are in need of internet and stable internet compared to South County. And that's primarily because South County's internet is all based on either satellite or hotspot internet compared to having the infrastructure that we see in South San Jose in particular. The only areas in South San Jose that we see that have been a struggle are some of the RV parks that are along the Monterey Road corridor. Those seem to be an area where we've had a struggle, but we've been able to push out hotspots into those areas. But that's just lack of infrastructure in those unincorporated areas.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So I want to just make sure we manage expectations. I think, you heard from John that we're hopeful that this can sort of come together, but I don't think in and of itself it's going to solve all of the pin marks that are described. And, cost is another sort of concern. And so I think, you know, I'm excited about the potential with WAVE, but I want to make sure that it's not a done deal yet, you know, at this point yet, and there's still a lot to happen in order to make this, you know, a go. So I just kind of want to manage everyone's expectations with that.
Thank you.
Well, and as I mentioned as well, the district has already procured and is in the process of distributing to the families that we've identified, those roughly over 300 households, 400 students. We are distributing hotspots to help as the short-term solution. I think what we also are cognizant of is, depending on the breadth and length of the potential recession, that the number of families in need might grow. And so you might have families that, for example, have infrastructure, but now no longer lack the ability to pay for internet. As they choose between necessities in their household, their priorities might shift and they might have to discontinue services they currently have. So I think we're watching carefully also if we see a spike in the number of families that are in need. I think in looking at those PIN maps, a lot of the families in need are because of lack of infrastructure in their currently. I think the next wave are going to be families that are negatively impacted by the recession and might have infrastructure, but not the financial means to access internet on a monthly basis. So we're continuing to watch those numbers, expecting that we might see an increase when students resume in the fall in the number of families in need.
Fantastic. Any other comments or questions before moving on? Mayor Constantine?
Thanks, Wendy. I was raising my virtual hand, but I guess.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make a comment on John, and I was just going to say, you know, the time that we're in has really highlighted the fact that people don't have access, and it's really accentuated it. So you can just join the chorus of people that are actually screaming to have something done. So John, you can represent the district and talk with our representative in the assembly, Robert Rivas, and just, you know, find out what he needs from us as far as any kind of advocacy to make this move. But I'm hoping also that the state will put some funds that may be being you know, loosened up to help cities like ours, help our communities that aren't connected and can't get connected. That's been an issue that's been going on for a long time, a subject that's been broached, but I think right now it's being highlighted because of the situation that we're in.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all for that informative discussion and great discussion on this critical issue. Next on our agenda is the Barela School Park Project, and I'm assuming that the school will take the lead on initiating this discussion.
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Anissa, and maybe you can talk about where we are in process and the work that we've done thus far with Chris related to the Parks Project.
Yeah, so we had some initial conversations with Chris and I forget, legal counsel, along with our legal counsel and Kirsten and myself, and I believe Casino possibly, regarding kind of what the contract could look like, some of our issues just in regards to school facility use, and what we're obligated to be able to provide to the community. So we had some brief discussions about that, and then going into a little bit more information on what the plan was, just regarding having the availability of the community in that area to be able to utilize the park space. We still have to go into the details of what the park space actually means, and the amount of land, whether it's 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acres. We know the amount, so we're still working through that. We do have an agreement that I will be sharing shortly with Chris to start reviewing, so we can both take it back and forth between our legal counsels to hopefully satisfy what that agreement will look like, and then it'll have to obviously go to our school board, and I'm sure either the parks and city council for approval.
Grace, did you want to add anything? You look.
I think
Okay.
Vanessa covered it. It would go to the Parks and Recreation Commission before the City Council, just for the team at the school district. There was considerable conversation on this item as part of our capital improvement program last night, with members of the public as well as council members. I guess I'll just say pushing to remove the project from our CIP.
Yeah, I mean, basically the motion last night when we brought our budget forward was approval of the CIP, but part of that motion was bringing back a discussion about funding for Barela Park once the school district has made a decision about the property.
Which I believe, from our understanding, the school district has made a decision about the property and is moving forward. So on the staff level, we do understand that. I think some members of the public were commenting that the decision was not made.
Okay.
At least that's our understanding at the staff level from all of my conversations with the team at the district.
Steve, did you want to say anything more to confirm or anything? You're muted.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. What was that?
Oh, I wasn't sure if Steve or you, and he said if you guys wanted to confirm what Chris was saying in terms of the school district's plans to move forward with the project, despite what I guess some public comment has been.
I don't know what the public comment has been. What public comment are you talking about?
I guess Chris said,
and I think our mayor and council member Carr might, and Christina might, but I believe
I'll be happy to jump in here.
Yeah.
We've been getting, as we've gone through our capital improvement program, this is a 6-year capital improvement program, millions and millions of dollars. And the $2 million for this one park is the most talked about, heated part of our conversation. And we are continually told by the public that the district hasn't made a decision yet on what to do with the school site, that we're told that the school population is going down. So we get all the arguments about why this district should not move forward with this project. And we're told that there is not yet a decision. Now, I have to admit, I've not attended your meetings to hear you all talk about it. So I'm hoping maybe you can share with us what the official position is from the district, because we're hearing from the public what they think your position is.
Oh, okay. Well, we've heard some of those comments as well throughout the last 6 years, 5 years. And upon receiving the land, there was an agreement that we would be building an elementary school there. And there's timing related to that, so that will happen. And that the board understood that upon the approval of the conveyance of the property, and the design that has been put forward would include some classrooms. And so everything was waiting on the legal challenges that are all settled in court, and also to follow that, the making sure that the condition of the land was suitable for building, which has been done as well.
Larry and Chris, does that answer your question and give you more clarity?
I guess I would ask, and you mentioned that you're going to be having a more comprehensive facilities discussion coming up. Do you have a timeline on this, and where does this fit in? The building of a school site on this property, where does it fit in with your facilities planning?
Well, the timeline, like everything with COVID-19, is a shifting and continually shifting issue. The plan originally on the conveyance was to actually be considering starting school there this coming year. But with the way, as you know, the dominoes need to fall with a new school, and maybe you don't know this, but with the new school being built, then there also has to be an adjustment of school boundaries, and that domino has yet to fall because of all the unknowns that are in place right now. Backing off of that, we're looking at some unknowns related to enrollment based on COVID-19. So that's impacting that. Clearly, we're not building and opening the school for this next fall. There was potential before COVID-19 that we would be having some classrooms there in the following year, and that's been discussed at some staff meetings and general meetings. We don't know that could happen either. And one of the unknowns, again, is the enrollment. We're planning for what we're predicting in the next year. And my confidence in any predictions we make on enrollment is not very high. This year, we predicted that we might, with the advent of COVID-19, that we might be declining enrollment as some had projected. We've actually increased over the spring. Kirsten, I don't know if you have a sense of what those numbers are at this point, but we give projections to our school sites about how many students they might have in order to staff, which we're doing right now to staff our school sites. Again, not knowing what the configuration is, not knowing whether people will send their kids to school. When we do know what the configuration is an unknown, but we have to do something to make sure that people are hired for the positions that we could best guess what our staffing is. Kirsten, do you have a sense of the changes in enrollment over the spring?
Over the spring so far, we've seen an increase in 2 kindergarten classes district-wide over what we projected. And so that has been our largest growth area. It's been fairly stable across secondary, although we've seen students in private schools begin to return to the district. I don't know whether that's a condition of economics right now, or families that we've heard some families returning their students from private school that they didn't want to pay for online private school. They didn't think that was a good value. So we've seen some changes in our secondary, but primarily in our elementary and in kindergarten, which is great because as those students matriculate up, it will bolster enrollment for years to come in the district.
So in hearing about the public comments that you may have received, which I apologize, I haven't been on those meeting calls or in those meetings, but it sounds like some of the same comments were from the people that actually prompted some of the lawsuits against the district, because it was the same types of arguments, either that or some residue from those initiatives to prompt those lawsuits and challenge some of the board. And I know some of our trustees have received messages as well. Again, the district prevailed in all the court issues, and so that's opened the way. We believe that the park project piece is up front and has to be part of the first phase of the district. There is a plan for that school, and the staff has been working closely with your city staff to identify the best way to make sure that the money is used wisely for what it's intended for. I hope that helps. John has a question.
More just to add a little bit from my perspective. I think both, with regard to the Barela project, I think both things are true. It has long been the district's plan to move forward, and that got delayed by these lawsuits, which the district prevailed in. And in the relatively short time that Trustee Sullivan and I have been on the board, about 1.5 years now, what's come to us for approval have been some financial items related to completing the cleanup of the property. I don't believe we've actually voted on funds for construction Though it's long been on the plan, but to the best of my knowledge, we haven't actually formally allocated money to start building the school. So if members of the public are saying, well, it's not decided on, perhaps that's what they're hanging their hat on. But it's certainly long been part of the plan, and that's my understanding. But and there's this whole process of what are our facilities needs, and on enrollment and all the other discussions, financial discussions. I keep saying right now our crystal balls are all snow globes in a hurricane. Well, we have never been in such a state of not really having a reasonable way to make predictions financially, enrollment-wise. Enrollment we've talked about a few times at the school board level, and I still see the same thing. There's two counter trends. One, California is expensive, and it's hard for our lowest income people are having the hardest time, and some are leaving. Whether that means returning to Idaho or returning to Mexico or going to their family in Kansas, that's going on. But the counter trend is, as we saw in the recession of 08, 9, 10, 11, 2010 was the Morgan Hill Unified's largest ever enrollment by a lot. And that was families that used to choose to pay for private school went, ooh, I'm not paying for private school. I'm just going to use what my taxes are already paying for. So those are two strong currents that are cutting in opposite directions, and then we're stuck in the middle. And so, yeah, great sympathy for the staff as they're trying to navigate, okay, how many students are we going to have without really knowing? So I think, just day by day adaptability is all we can do. But that's, and if I've misstated the situation regarding Barela, I'm sure the superintendent staff will correct me. So that's how I understand kind of where we're at.
Steve, you're muted still.
Thank you. I was just saying you nailed it, John. Thank you so much. The one thing I also want to do is help understand the mindset on what the opening means. When we open a new school, the research talks about the value of making sure it's done carefully and with the sensitivity to the impact of the community and the other schools around. So just to help people understand what that might look like. It's not, okay, we reboundary and then kids go to shift to a new school depending on where they're located. The ideal way to do it, having been through this a couple times, is to grow the school up for that boundary area. I have not wavered at all in conversations with community members or staff in that ideally we would start with a grade or two, and it would be the lower grades, of course, if we're looking at a K-5, or it could be even a preschool. So in the new boundary area for that particular school, the students in those grade levels would start at that school, but that doesn't mean that students that we're going to start any other classes until the following year. And so as the years progress, it might be kindergarten, and the second year of that school would be kindergarten first because the kindergartners move up, third year, kindergarten first, second, on that way. At the same time, sensitivity to the community and obviously having some emotional attachment for families that are in schools where they are currently having the older kids go to that school is that those students would be grandfathered into their school because, number one, there's no grade level for them at the new school. At the same time, if let's say we know that SG Barela will draw from Nordstrom and JAM maybe because of boundary changes, it just makes sense proximity wise. Besides that, Nordstrom and JAM are impacted, and there are more students than that are either in that area or desire to go to those schools than we can fit. So we always have a waiting list. So let's say that we have a student or family that lives in the new Barela attendance area. They have a fourth grader as a hypothetical example, and they have a kindergartner the first year that we have kindergarten at SG Barela. Well, the, the kindergartner would naturally go to SG Barela in the new class, first class, exciting time. The fourth grader might be at Nordstrom, let's say, from previous years, because that was the boundary area. My advice to the staff and the board would be to develop a grandfather clause for that family. If they had an older sibling that is at Nordstrom, that kindergartner would then be able to choose, or the parents could choose for that kindergartner, that they could go to Nordstrom or they could be in the new class at SG Barela. So that is the sensitivity toward the family and community needs that are there. So just to understand, it's not like a snap year where all of a sudden everybody's shifting all over the place and we have new buildings. So that helps us with facilities as well. So we wouldn't necessarily need to have a lot of facilities built. The current design and plan would be, I think, potentially six classrooms in the first building phase of SG Barela. And that would not include an administrative building, because we could start with a grade level or two. Hi, Allie. This is our fix. We get to see Allie every day. Yeah.
Never get tired of that.
Yeah. And she will contribute too, believe me. And then, so the point is that with the buildings, that we wouldn't necessarily need to build an admin building right away, because we could use a classroom for the start of the school that would be starting out small and then growing up in that way. So that's the general concept. Nothing has been formulated, or I should say formalized with that yet, but we do have the design. I hope that helps.
Any other questions? I don't see any virtual hands nor physical hands. Okay, thank you. Last item for this particular section is this update for city summer recreation programs.
Yeah, we put this item on the agenda just as an informational item so that we can just kind of describe what we're doing at the city with what the order allows. And so I've asked Chris just to share with you the programs that we have underway at this point.
I guess I'll use, we have the same crystal ball snow globe issue with everything that we're doing, but with the county order that was updated on the 5th, we were allowed to do a few more things. So we are running some summer camp programs. They're not full day programs, and they're through some of our contract partners. So we have 4 different camp programs. That's in alignment with the county rules on camp, which require 3 weeks, and the school district knows very well about this, as they're formatting athletics summer stuff in the same exact format. So our camps are running under the same format that the city's running. And then the cool thing, on the 5th, they told us we could open Aquatics on a limited level. So on Monday this week, we ended up opening our aquatic center for lap swim, swim team, aqua fitness classes, and private one-on-one swim lessons that will actually start this Saturday, which was pretty nice. Even though it's very, very limited, it was pretty nice to get those programs moving again. And the use is crazy. We can only have 1 swimmer per lane. So basically around the clock, there's someone swimming in the pool. It is pretty neat to see the kids on our swim team, as well as the Santa Clara swim team, that are walking in and out of that facility. Even though they're having to be separated, getting to do that activity is pretty excited. And a lot of the parents are pretty excited they're able to do that. So it's nice to see that. Our parks are still open in general, but high touch areas like playgrounds and those things are closed. We are looking to get our skate park open in the coming weeks. Our dog park is open. And the cool thing we have going on right now is a virtual membership from the CRC that is free to anyone in the community at this point. We've had a lot of interest in that, and we have classes. Primarily the classes are the big thing that people are participating in, but we've been sharing that a lot and have had a ton of participants and feedback on that. So that is summer recreation right now. And hopefully we'll hear next week that we'll be able to do a few more things starting in the next weeks or the next month.
I don't know if anybody has any questions. I have one, which is I noticed in some of the different communications, like I've seen from the school district and even from my child's club, that there's a couple of pieces of information that weren't explicitly stated at first that I think that are important. I'm just curious if the city has been communicating this. One is that coaches or adults who supervise kids programs can only do so with one cohort in a 3-week period. And that means you can't, like with teams for sports, you can't have one coach cycle through 12 groups of kids, hour after hour. They have to pick one group and stay with them for 3 weeks, which is a really critical point. And then the second being that, and this I only kind of picked out from reading the order. The second is that kids cannot participate in more than one cohort in a 3-week period. So meaning they can't do like a summer camp with the city in the morning and then go to their high school and have a football training with their teammates. And that those families need to choose one activity for 3 weeks. And so I'm just curious, is the city putting out this type of information for families that sign up for your programs? Because I know that there is some onus that we need to try to communicate this so that they are aware and that they know that they have to make a choice.
Yeah, it's that's specific for the camp program. So it's specifically communicated for the camp programs. Pool operations are specifically designated under another area of the order, so that's not under the same guidance, but you have to read the order really detailed like you have to understand the differences between them. Like if you're in a pool and you're swimming on a swim team, you could potentially participate in a camp as well because you're just using the lane by yourself to swim on the swim team and you're not contacting others. So it is complicated, but we are trying to spread the same message, and we have had those conversations. Our camps are geared towards the younger kids, so it'd be primarily if they were doing something with the Y and doing something with the city versus them participating in, say, one of the school sports versus just because which are primarily going at the high school level right now, and we don't have the crossover as much, but we are communicating that in our programs, as well as all the numerous requirements for everything that people have to do, from face coverings to the social distancing. Yeah, we are. If you come to the Aquatic Center, it's like a maze of tape on the ground directing you all around the place and how to wait and how to go. So yeah, but excellent point.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Steve, sorry.
I was just going to say, from the school side, as you know, with our regulations and for everybody's sake, we have indicated the same. The adults know that when the kids ask, hey, can I be, doing football and whatever it is, then they say you could choose one if it's a cohort group. Same with swimming, if it's a lane issue or whatever, that they can participate in the activity, because that is like an individual activity. And then what also we're recommending is that along with the cohort grouping that for the adults, is that there can be recruited parents that could be assigned to those particular cohorts to lead them. And situations like we're going through the approval for the band, the marching band configuration, how the cohorts are spread out, but as if you've ever watched, and most of you have, the marching band activities on a field, is that you could have one band leader that is not close to a cohort that can lead many different groups that are spread out around the field. So that is a part of a discussion. I'm not sure if they're actually going to implement that, but there's ways to make sure that you really abide by the safe standards set forth by the public order, but still serve the needs of the kids in many ways. thank you for asking about that.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. Are there any other reports or updates that need to be made? Okay, and suggestions for topics for future meetings?
I think we have some standards. I want to hear more on internet access as we keep moving along on that, and facilities. Steve, do you have a date when you're going to have that facilities conversation with the board that you mentioned in the beginning of this meeting?
We came up with some dates that we need to propose to the board because
okay.
to make sure that everybody or it works for the majority.
Breaking news here.
Yeah. Sometimes those things happen.
Larry,
That's
I missed
okay.
the first
That's
thing
okay.
that you said. What did you say before facilities? I wanted to make sure I caught that.
Internet.
The
Internet. Got it. Thank you.
Conversation.
Yep.
And so if our next meeting is following that facilities conversation that you all have, I think that'd be great to hear more about that and what your facilities plans are, and more about Kirsten, where those new classes of kindergartners, where they're coming from in town and where you see enrollment growth in town. I think that would be certainly helpful for me.
John?
I have one, and maybe it's moved, but long ago, maybe a year ago, we had some discussions about community use of facilities, sports teams, that sort of thing. And there was some discussion of maybe figuring out a more joint work around a registration process or something. I think the two staffs looked at that, and maybe it's been looked at and said, that's just not feasible. I don't know. We haven't talked about that in a long time, and it's certainly not the most urgent issue, not even in the top 10 of most urgent issues, but be interested to hear either have we dropped that idea, or is that something that's still to be explored later? If it is going to continue being explored, at some point it might come back here.
Well, and either way, at least for an update, right, John? So we'll put it on the next one.
Good suggestion.
Anything else? Okay, right before we adjourn, I just actually wanted to take this opportunity to welcome Chief Paulsgrove in his new formal capacity as the chief of the Morgan Hill Police Department. I don't know if you've participated before, maybe as interim, but welcome now in your more formal capacity, and congratulations to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Wendy, we do have a section on here for other reports and updates, and so
yeah, I asked that before.
Oh, okay.
Is there something? Yeah, I asked that before we went into suggestions for future agenda items. But if somebody wants to make a report, happy to hear it.
So I just wanted to let everybody know that we have our second town hall on police, operations, policies, and so forth this evening. And so Chief Paulsgrove will sort of give a PD update tonight. And then most of the time will just be spent on Q&A, because this is the second town hall that we've had. And then the following week's town hall, so June 25th, a week from today, we're going to have Supervisor Wasserman come and just talk about the order, and just talk about, from his perspective, where we're at. And we, of course, we get a lot of inquiries just about, why Santa Clara County is so different than the rest of the state. And so he's going to address some of that next week. So I just encourage you to join us next week, and as well as tonight.
Thank you.
Trustee Sullivan, this is Michelle. Before we adjourn, I have the proposed future city school liaison meeting dates at the end of the agenda. I did adjust the last meeting of our cycle to account for the district staff going on 410. So we're not always, it seems like every June we're trying to find a new meeting. So I'm trying to be proactive. And if that looks good to everybody, I'll go ahead and send the meeting invites out, and obviously we can adjust if things come up. But I just wanted to just quickly touch base and make sure that looks good. And obviously I have locations with very hopeful thinking that we will get back to some semblance of normal soon. But obviously if we are still doing Zoom meetings, they wouldn't be at those locations.
Thank you, Michelle.
Only in our minds.
Being proactive. Steve, and maybe Kelly, does the calendar look okay to you?
Yeah, Michelle, if I could go ahead and take a peek at the calendar and I can get back to you later today, that would be great.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No calendar issues for me.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you for your participation and the great discussions that we've had this morning. I'd like to go ahead and adjourn at 9:35.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Wendy.
Have a great day. Great rest of your day.
Thank you.